hardworking executive assistant, Elizabeth Sizemore, who hides behind the screen over there, asked me once, and I don't think she had to ask me again because she knows the answer. But one time she asked me, she said, "What's the favorite part of session?" And I said, "When I can step down on the floor and just share a couple of moments with my brethren." And I'd like to share just a couple of thoughts with you. You heard already from my lovely lady. There was a little statement in there about the fact that, how did he come about to the fraternity? I didn't have any family members in the fraternity. I had seen a couple of what I found out later to be Masonic lodges. But right after I reached the 25th birthday, I had Sunday dinner at my mom's house, and she said, "You ought to consider joining the Masonic Lodge." And I said, "What's the Masonic Lodge?" And she said, "I don't know. But all the good men I have known throughout my life, turns out they were members." That's the sole reason I'm standing here. In effect, because of each of you, because the kind of man that you are. Not necessarily the kind of Masonic leader you are. You got all the gold. You got the fancy aprons. I got a couple of those too. It's not about the robes. It's about who you are. How people look at you very well might mean whether they join you. And sure not what we wear. It's not necessarily what we do inside these meetings either. Because guess what? I didn't see what went on inside of those meetings before I decided to join them. Yet we have so much trouble listening to the final admonition in every meeting. These generous principles are to extend further. Every human being has a claim upon your kind offices. Therefore, do good unto all. We don't say just those inside the building with you. Do good unto all. A-L-L. That means the guy that jumps in front of you at the McDonald's line. That means the guy that's sitting at the traffic light when the light turns green and he thinks it's more important to send that text. All. A-L-L. But we add to that, more especially to the household of the faithful. What does that mean and why? I had to find that out as I went ahead. I went along with the deal. I went and talked to them. And I joined. And I had the blessing from my father that the Tyler of that lodge was a man that within a few years referred to Marianne and I as his adopted children. We came that close. Most worshipful and illustrious, John Boyd Obenshane. The Tyler of my lodge, when I first came in it, was the Grand Senior Warden in Virginia. And he just sort of took me under his wing. And he certainly took Marianne. He and Joanne took Marianne under their wing. You saw how she feels based on that video about all of this. Because she sees you outside the lodge, outside this little squared circle. And what does that mean in our journey? You know, how do we become coming in and then ultimately being an example for the next one? How? Why do we do that? What does it all mean to us? What's so special about us? Well, what's so special about us is the reason that when I talk, I walk. And I usually walk near this. Because it was right there in that little lodge of then 69 members that I formed the bonds that carried forward. You saw how I stood right there and how I received my good friends, the Grand Masters from Texas, South Dakota, AC from South Carolina, this young man here who tells people that in part he's the Grand Master of Kentucky because of a few articles that I wrote when I was Grand Master. Think about that. Take that pebble and toss it into the pond, and it's the effect you have on others. But we can do that together because we are bound right there from where we started. And it means that when he suffered the loss of illustrious and most worshipful Tommy Watson, that as soon as I found out, I picked up the phone and called the Grand Secretary of South Carolina, and you had just come into the room with the other Grand Lodge officers. Because we promised that that's what we would do, didn't we? And I was reminded of that in June of this year. I was reminded of why I stay in this. Because there are wonderful men in here, and we take care of one another. In June, I was sitting in Philadelphia. We were being hosted by Mel Bazemore. We meaning Walt and Corey and Mel and I, had just concluded the 4th summit of the Grand Commanders of the United States. And we were sitting at the table, and a phone call came. It was from my dear Masonic brother and almost brother, Scott Obenshane. I told them, I said, I have to take this because I kind of knew what was going to happen. I took the call, and I went off in the corner over there, and I talked to Scott, and indeed, John Boyd Obenshane had passed. John had not known me for maybe 8 or 10 years. He had not known his own lovely lady for some time. But it was still difficult to know. that at least maybe even the glimmer that sometimes came to his eye as I presented him with his 60-year pen a few years ago. A man whose physical health, he was presented in the lodge to me with his son and his best friend. And as I did the ceremony for his 60th year pen, John kind of came into focus a few times, and I knew he knew me, and I knew he was there. But, and I knew that the man who had got me into all of this was there. And then he would fade away, and then he would come back. But when he was there, I knew why. I knew we still had a little bit of this. But it was proven to me when I was standing over in that corner after I got off the phone trying to compose myself. Corey Hawkins came over and said, "Sovereign, are you okay?" About 2 steps behind him was Walt Wheeler. And Mel was getting up out of his chair to come around the table at the same time. That's who we are. It doesn't end because we have promised it. And you saw all of this stuff that we've been doing. You saw Gabby, that scholar, that product of our programs. You saw the scholarship recipients. Samantha, you saw what we're doing. And you know what? When it's all said and done, because of the promises we made here, in the presence of our Supreme Architect, by whatever name that we individually call him, with his strength, living up to the promises that we have made, we're going to continue to be the kind of men that proves my mama right. God bless you for who you are. Thank you.